Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, Pat and James talk about how we don't know what's going to resonate or why our creative efforts aren't getting accepted or finding their audience. In other words, we explore our common creative conundrum, subjectivity.
Okay, so how are we going to talk about subjectivity beyond just writing? Because I think that'd be something good to keep in mind.
Yeah,
Now.
no, absolutely. So subjectivity in terms of when I think about it, I think about there's maybe two sides to it where there's you as the creative and you're producing stuff that you like and hopefully others are going to like. And then there's the audience. And so if a particular audience doesn't like it, does it mean that it doesn't have value, or is that the subjective nature that some audiences will prefer one thing and not another?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we started because you just nailed it. I think we should just use that as the entry point. You know what's weird about the word subjectivity? It's got more than one definition, but as we mean it, it's just that
Mhm.
um, your opinion is based on or influenced by your own feelings, like your own tastes or your own opinions. So that's what's strange about being in an artistic field, whether no matter what field it's in, is that some people will love modern dance and some people will prefer ballet. And so the artist's job in some ways, same for writers, same for actors, I guess, although they
Mhm.
have a more sort of stringent intake system with auditioning because but they still have to figure out what the person who's going to be there buying their work or viewing their work wants. So you have no control over subjectivity. You don't know what other people's tastes are
Mhm.
necessarily, or what their biases or opinions or feelings are about what you're doing. You can't, and they can't know what you're doing until they see it. So it's something that happens kind of late in the process after you've created something.
Yeah. Well, you can't create based on trying to anticipate the audience,
No, you
right?
can't.
You can do your writing or what have you, or go in for an audition and do your interpretation of a part
Yeah.
and feel like this has meaning for me. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I want to express. This is what I see in the character or I see in a song, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and when I go in and I present this or I submit a piece of writing or what have you, it's knowing that it could be really good,
Yeah.
but I'm still going to get turned down because this is such a subjective business, right? And I think all of us have had those stories where we've gotten rejected for something that we thought we were going to get,
Uh-huh.
or you get a certain way down the path
Yeah.
and you think, oh, I've got this. And then in the end, you get turned down for it.
Yeah.
And feels really devastating, especially when you're earlier in your career. And so you're not kind of used to how this works.
Mhm.
And you have to navigate that and feel like, no, do I need to change the performance? Do I need to change the piece, the writing, the art, song, whatever it is? Or is it okay and very good as it is? And I just haven't found the right audience for it yet, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other subjectivity where, so very early in my career, there was a magazine I really, really wanted to get into. It had a small readership, but the readership was based in New York City, and a lot of them were editors, acquisitions editors, agency, all that kind
Mm.
of stuff. And I had this creative nonfiction piece, and I really wanted to get it in. I submitted it. They accepted it.
Mm.
They said, we're going to publish it in this section of the magazine, which was up front in the magazine.
Nice.
And here's your date. Here's the date that it's going to go out, right? So I
Uh-huh.
get all excited, wait for it to happen. And like 2 days before I've anticipate I'm going to get the magazine, like the physical magazine in my
Wow.
hands with my story,
Yeah.
I get an email from the editor saying that the publisher nixed my piece and put somebody else's in that she preferred. And there was no like delaying me a month or anything like that.
It's just
That
you're
was it.
out.
I'm
Wow.
out. So then I
Wow.
get the magazine with the other piece.
Mm-mm.
And I had written about the experience of a small community losing sort of a son of the community, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And in my interpretation of that having come from a larger city, and the piece they replaced it with is some woman writing about butterflies and how she loves to follow butterflies flittering through the woods kind of thing.
No.
Yeah. And so I was just like, it tore me up. It
Yeah.
absolutely tore me up. And it
Wow.
took a long time for me to figure out, okay, my piece was perfectly fine.
Mm.
This publisher, either she had a relationship with this person and says, yeah, we'll put it in, or she felt like, you know what, his piece is a little dour, a little dark. Um, and that's not really our vibe and our brand. And this
Mm.
piece is a little bit more woodsy, butterfly-y.
Yeah.
So that fits a little bit better. So we're gonna go with that. And we're gonna say thank you, but no thank you to this guy.
Yeah, so she actually went out of her way to trump what the editor had already agreed to. Did they give you a
Yeah,
kill fee or anything?
I can't remember, but probably not.
Yeah.
And that was my first taste of subjectivity, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a
And
big one.
so, we all have to learn how to deal with this. And the hard ones, I think, are the ones where you get a little way down the process
Mhm.
only to have the rug pulled out. I
Yeah.
think those are really tough. And I think other ones, so there's lots of contests, right? And I think whether you're a musician and whatnot, there's all these kinds of contests for creating a song or creating a piece of art and what have you. And you enter one feeling like I'm really in a strong position to win.
Mhm.
And maybe that's like a psychological thing where you sort of talking yourself into it. Um, and then you don't, then you have this huge disappointment. And when that happens, once, twice, three, four, five times, then you start to question yourself as an artist.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and it's that double guessing, I think, is where we get into trouble.
I think you're right. Okay, so I wanna tell you my experience, which I think was around 2014, so 10 years ago. I had a manuscript on submission to Big 5 imprints through an agent, and New American Library, they were very interested. They're a Penguin imprint, and so they said, "Yes, the acquisitions editor loved it. She was gonna bring it to the editorial board." They mostly loved it. It got the further it got up the it took 2 months for her to say, "Yeah, I love this. I'm gonna bring it to the board," to my agent to email me and say they said no because, New American Library had mostly, I think they said something along the lines of it was, too masculine for their readership. So
Wow.
it was historical fiction from a male point of view, and they were publishing more like I don't know if they published this one, but things like Loving Frank and The Paris Wife, so very, sort of women's fiction slant on historical fiction at the time. And I just kind of I it had been in a chain of, "No, here's the feedback from the acquisitions editor." So it hadn't even gone up the editorial board in most of the submissions to the Big
Mhm.
5, but this one I think I was like, "Oh, great." And then when they said no, I was like, "Oh, bummer." And then I just moved on. But I think it percolated its way down into, wow, even in a business like this, even if somebody is willing to go to bat for your book, that doesn't mean that the publisher they work for is actually gonna take their opinion seriously, because there's all these other people who have books they want too, like other
Mhm.
acquisitions editors. And so I realized that it was a much more complicated landscape than I had anticipated, at least in the Big
Yeah.
5. And also I think I just kinda went shrug, dust my hands, it's like, well, if I can't do anything about it, maybe I'll just like, if this goes sideways, I'll just write for myself for a while. I won't submit or anything like that. I kinda went into turtle mode, and didn't know it. That's the thing, though. I thought I was still functioning as like, "Oh, yeah, I'm somebody who sends shit out," but then I stopped sending shit out, and I was like, "Huh, that's weird. Maybe it's not ready." And so I went through these conversations with myself. I had an agent, so I sent her some stuff. It wasn't ready. And, I guess what strikes me as being somebody who's, sort of dependent on, as you say, finding the right audience for your
Mhm.
work, is that, in my opinion, it's gone a couple of ways for me. One is like resilience, I
Mhm.
developed that muscle of being rejected. I understand that it's a very subjective business and that it's right place, right time, right stuff. The other part is the self-image of somebody whose shit doesn't get published. It's too weird,
Right.
it's too off the mark. It's, so you can sort of suck multiple rejections, even if you know it's from subjectivity, into your identity accidentally, and then stop doing what you need to be doing in order to get your work out there. And that can happen so deep under the scenes, especially like from my background, Scottish people, like we just drink our troubles away. We don't actually deal with anything. So that's a
Yeah, there's no,
generalization.
yeah, there's
But
no field group for
yeah,
that.
yeah, I just didn't really, and plus you work in isolation a lot of times as an
Yeah.
artist, and so I just didn't really deal with my shit, and, that's such a strange, um it's such a strange aspect of this industry because widgets are not, they might be creative in the first design, but after that, figuring out how to get your widget to the market is just a matter of logistics and, like lots of stuff you can wrap your head around. The only people that are going to buy your widgets are people who need that particular widget. So,
Mhm.
widget being like a shorthand for any gizmo, which is a shorthand for any widget. But anyway, the point is that, there isn't this, I don't find it as confusing as I do with creative products. And maybe it's
Wow.
not that confusing. Maybe opera buffs, they only ever go to the opera, but I just don't think that's true. I think people gravitate towards different things and you have to know how to get it to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the trick, right? Is
Mhm.
finding your audience. There's not a lot of people out there who are just naturally going to help you do that. There's plenty of people you can pay,
Yeah.
and maybe, some probably provide a great service, some maybe not, some may not get you as a creative.
Mhm.
And so the advice and the service they provide doesn't really work because you're not really connecting and they're not really connecting with you. So
Mhm.
so there's a lot of room, for things to kind of slip or, not hit the target that you're trying to hit.
Mhm.
And very few people who are on the gatekeepers, right? The decision makers, you know, you can find little bios of them. Well, certainly agents and publishers say, here's what we're looking for. Definitely recording labels say this is what we tend to record, or, they want to know your genre.
Mhm.
I'm sure galleries are the same. This is kind of our zone, this is where our customers are.
Yeah.
And, but even still, it's really hard to know. I think mine fits, but I'm not sure.
Mhm.
And you could submit it, send it in, whatever the process is, and that person, depending on the minute, the moment, what's going on, how busy they feel, all these different kinds of things, say, yeah, this is fine, but no,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And, so when we go through that, it's then hard to go to our non-creative friends who aren't doing what we're doing
Mhm.
and say, I had a really tough one today because I
Yeah.
thought this was going to be a really great fit and I'm feeling kind of bad about it. And that, people are, obviously friends and family and they want to be kind of understanding, but sometimes that, they just kind of don't get it. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
you're
they,
right,
yeah.
there is that like trying to figure out what the fuck, right?
Yeah.
And with very little information and not having oftentimes a lot of people who really have experienced it there to be able to communicate about it.
Mhm. For sure, because I know that some, like in my family, the creative stuff other family members do, the last time they did that, was in school where the teacher has to take it,
Mhm.
and then you get a mark.
Yeah.
But, yeah, to translate, from the teacher to the whole wide world who doesn't necessarily give a shit or have any interest in your stuff, yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around even if you're doing that, So imagine if you're, God bless, punching a clock, and, you just have to hit certain marks, and your boss has to tell you what's wrong if they don't like it. That's so it's must be really hard to wrap your brain around what it's like to have to kind of not have any of that feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, and then and then if you, get the worst feedback of all, which is, "Well, why don't you get a job?"
Oh,
Um,
well, that's from them. Right.
that's like a whole other
Yeah,
zone,
yeah. No, I mean, people you
but
submit some creative work to or not. If they turn around and say you should get a job, that's messed
then
up.
they're assholes. But it's hard, and then and we, of course, fetishize, the culture fetishizes the artist or the creative who is instantaneously successful, right?
Mhm,
Seems
mhm.
to do it without any preparation, throws their thing out into the world, and the world immediately embraces it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that, we want that kind of success, but it's so infrequent and rare, and there's an expectation outside of what we do that that's kind of how it works. And so if it doesn't work that way for you, then maybe you should think about something else. And
Mhm.
so, you got to be tough to do this,
Yeah, I
and
think so too. I'm just thinking, my daughter was talking to me about Sabrina Carpenter, who's a musician, and actually showed me a few different sort of um iterations. Sabrina Carpenter is still really young. I think she's in her 20s, and she's found a vibe that has made her, really popular, and she's very talented. And so to see her vibes before that, the ones, the image that she had created didn't complete like it still because she was talented, the image um wasn't as important as the fact that she was
Mhm,
doing what she was doing, like that she was expressing her gift. But the thing that really blew her out of the water in terms of, getting super popular, with people my daughter's age was that she found the right way to connect with her audience. She takes
mhm,
sort of a cheeky, turn on, like, kinda Disney princess, and I could be completely, head up my ass around this. This is how I perceive her. Disney princess, sort of Marilyn Monroe-ish, but, taking the piss out of it the whole time, like, um,
yeah,
having fun with it, plus she's got really catchy songs. So it wasn't overnight. It looks like it was overnight because she's in her 20s and she's making really great coin
mhm,
and touring, but, it wasn't actually it took a few tries at finding the vibe that hit the audience that was gonna just sing her songs, with each
mhm,
other in the car as they're driving along or whatever.
yeah.
Maybe that's a very 80s view of success, but anyway, the thing is, I don't think we can even know. Who knows if there was a committee going, "Oh, you should try this." It was probably, and I'm just also talking out my hat now, probably just a thing she thought would be funny because you can't know what people are going to respond to. I don't know if you can do enough focus groups in the world. I mean, people with products that aren't creative
Mhm,
products, they can know, "Oh yeah, it looks like bamboo sheets are in. I'm going to
yeah,
get a, Egyptian bamboo or whatever is, a slight got to have that thing on that, and then we'll figure out how to make it the right price for the right people and let them know about it and so on." But when something is just out of somebody's head and it's kind of how they view the world, so wrapped up to all music is personal. I
mhm,
think many books are personal, not so much nonfiction,
yeah,
but a lot of art is personal. It's just like, yeah, it's your personality that's out there.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, and so here we are trying to figure out how do we beat subjectivity, right?
Can it but is that what we're trying to do? Beat it?
Well, I think beat it in terms of how can we, bring, I guess, not so much predictability as it is remove at least some of the subjectivity, right? So
Interesting.
even if it's just doing enough homework to know that I have a 15-minute documentary that I want to submit to different places, and I'm going to do a bunch of homework to find the three that are really the most likely, right?
Yes.
I mean, you know, doing all that kind of stuff, which adds more work. It's another
Well, that's it.
layer of shit you got to do.
Yeah.
But I think that's better than what a lot of people do, which is just the like flail,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah,
Fire hose everything I've got out.
yeah.
And and that in its own way can be kind of demoralizing because you're going to get a shit ton of rejections.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and you spend just as much time, um, you know, machine gunning your shit to everybody as you would doing the research and then sending it to a really tight list of people who have already shown by their own output that they are like they vibe with your stuff. So I have
mhm.
a I have an idea. I do not want to add another experiment to our gifted underachievers plates. So this is just an
Yeah. Yeah,
idea.
the
I'm
lab
thinking
is a little backed up.
we're
I
gonna
would say.
drop this ball if we make it a thing. So it's not a ball. It's just a wafting cloud. Um, a, a sweet smelling wafting cloud of an idea, which is what if you know, we, what if I, what if the hypothesis is that it's that since there's subjectivity and we know there's subjectivity and maybe you can't beat subjectivity, but what if you can sort of exploit subjectivity?
Yeah.
And so let's say you are, and I know this is already a thing, but let's say you find people, like I write about different stuff. It's quite weird, but it's
Mm.
almost always got this germ of somebody who doesn't understand their world and is is trying to survive.
Yeah.
So, could be a symptom of my own issues, but what I think is, what if you find those people? Let's say, those people that are adjacent to something else that's in your work. So I'm a train freak. I wrote this entire novel about a guy on a train, basically, or he was
Uh,
mostly on the train. What if I, what if I look at historical train groups, enthusiasts, because there's going to
mhm.
be some people in there who will read it just because it's set on a train, and then
Right.
there will be a subset of those people who like the fact that this guy has no fucking clue how to set his world right, and then a whole bunch of shit happens with Thomas Edison. So what if I spend all the time like with that was the one that got turned down by the New American Library. What if I went at it the other way? I mean, I'm not saying I would use that manuscript because it's old news, but the premise is the same, that you can find your vibe tribe, if I may call them that.
We've coined yet another term, perhaps.
Find your vibe tribe and then find gatekeepers who are also part of your vibe tribe. It's a Venn diagram. Va- gate
Yeah.
Gatekeepers in your industry are one circle. Your vibe tribe about whatever your project is that you're working on is another circle. There's going to be that little overlap of a
Yeah.
gatekeeper who's also in your vibe tribe. I mean, would you need to quit your job and just become a private detective? Maybe.
Well, I see you down by the tracks, wandering around saying, acquisitions editors. Are there any acquisitions editors around?
With an
And
oil
there's
lamp.
with an oil lamp, and classically dressed hobos, right?
A meerschaum pipe and a Sherlock Holmes hat.
Yeah,
Anybody looking for Penguin? Anybody here look?
burn marks from the embers from your steam engine that you've lost.
I don't care. I'm gonna do it. Gate. Oh shit! Here I go with another experiment. I'm not gonna do it.
Well, maybe we can hand that off to like, somebody who's listening. If you want to go try it, please do. Save us, from adding another experiment to our already full laboratory of experiments.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I think, one of the things that you and are like getting at is doing the standard stuff, like what I was talking about with the documentary filmmaker and just
yeah,
doing, your homework and finding out who's most likely feels really unsatisfying. And it feels really like duh. of course.
It does feel very duh.
Yeah. And so it's like, how do you, we don't know, I guess we don't have really the big answer, but, how do you do something that feels a lot less unsatisfying and a lot more targeted? And I think that's where you get a little bit more excitement to actually do that work, is when you feel like, oh, this is going to work. This is going to actually produce something.
Yeah. Or it
Um,
happens by accident, you know.
yeah.
Like, okay, so I think the vibe tribe, I'm serious. I'm going back to this vibe tribe idea. Vibe tribe slash gatekeeper person. Um, all you gotta do is figure out your vibe. And, there are no clubs for beleaguered fuck
Brain
ups.
enthusiasts.
If you're a beleaguered fuck up, there's no club, as far as I know. So I gotta,
Well, gifted underachievers, apparently.
yeah. Yeah, I guess, beleaguered fuck up is just a more extreme version of gifted
Yeah,
underachiever.
maybe we didn't name the podcast properly.
Oh God. Okay. Well, what do you think?
Yeah,
Have we
I
come to any kind of slight hint of a solution? Because I love doing research, but I don't have time to do the kind of research we're talking about.
yeah.
But you know what it does allow what even taking the idea that, you should really narrow down who you're approaching with your shit. What that does force you to do is to look at your shit more objectively, really,
Mm,
yourself, and go, "Okay, so this is the 7th novel I've written, and it's the best one I've ever written, and I think it can squeeze into these publishing categories, and, if I describe it this way, it might interest that agent." Forget
mm,
all that shit, and just imagine you're the person looking at it from the outside, and you're like, "Well, what is it?" This is something you told me a while ago about the tenants. What's
mm,
it really, about? What's the, who's following or whatever, can you interest in this? Like, who can you capitalize
mm,
off, basically? And then how do you make contact with them? What I'm realizing now is it doesn't have to be contact about the book. It's much more of a slow game if you're actually thinking about what are your main themes as a writer, period.
mm.
And it's probably harder for a ghostwriter because you take on the client's theme.
Yeah, yeah. You're kind of as a ghostwriter, I don't want to say trapped, but the client is what they want to do is what they want to do, and how they then take that and go about marketing it is how they're going to do that. Um, but really, that's like one part, and there's definitely a lot of subjectivity in terms of why a client hires you and why one doesn't, and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. But when you're thinking about your own creative output, and and this is really a constant theme that we have, is there's only so much time, there's so much that has to get done.
Yeah.
And then when you add this other layer of you should be doing this and should be doing that and should be doing the other thing if you want your thing to get published, your art to be accepted, your song to get an audience, on and on. Like, remember Doug, right?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
from oh gosh, blanking on the name.
Finn? Doug Harrison from Finn?
Ben, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
Finn.
Ben.
Yeah,
He said, God, if I could only just create music and not have to deal with any of the marketing stuff, that would be the perfect life. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, I think we were all there.
yeah,
Um, but I think the question, I think we're just coming to a bigger question and having more of a discussion and saying, yes, we're feeling this too, which is how do you get to, when you have so much going on, what are the small iterative things that have the most value that can get you at least a little bit closer to where you want to be,
yeah.
right? And the other thing too is we're always waiting for that quote unquote breakthrough, right?
Mhm.
Thing that for whatever reason really resonates with somebody and leads to the next and the next and the next that we've seen other people experience.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what that is. I think we could probably have a whole, segment talking about that and how you would approach it. But I think that's a big question. When's it going to happen? And
Yeah.
that subjectivity is, I almost got there very early on by with this piece. I felt like
Hmm.
that, got pulled at the last minute,
Yeah.
and so we have to deal with that. That is the creative life,
Yeah.
and when you're at this mid-level trying to figure out how to get up the ladder, uh, that is part of this life.
Right. Yeah. See, I don't feel the when's it going to happen question. I feel like maybe when's it going to happen for this project?
Yeah.
But that's just a slight difference. But I do agree. It can be hard to keep grinding it out when every aspect of the thing except actually creating it is so much work and requires so much diligence and research and time that it's almost like you spend more work figuring out how to get the thing out there than you do creating the thing.
Hmm.
And that feels backwards to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I wonder if it's been like that since time immemorial. Like a lot of writers in Victorian times started their own magazines, like Dickens ran, what was it, Our Mutual Friend or something like that? I can't remember
Mhm.
actually the name of the mag, but and they just published each other's work in installments. So I don't know if anything's really harder or easier. There's more noise. I just feel like the subjectivity aspect must have a solution. And I feel like the solution is not so much at the creation stage, but at the finding your way, your sort of pathway into somebody whose job is getting your shit out, because
Right.
getting your own shit out is so time consuming. Like, that if you can create a relationship with, say, for us, a publisher would be a good relationship, or at least an agent who's got good
Mhm.
relationships with publishers and who knows publishers who want what you're writing, then that's better than, like you say, you can't write for the market. You can't do anything for the market because the market is always kind of 2 years behind. Um,
Mhm.
if you make something now that's big now, by the time it gets out there, it's too late. Nobody wants it.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and plus it's not satisfying creatively. So, yeah, I think, there's a few things that we have arrived at. Subjectivity is a thing. It's never gonna go away because it's human nature. It's how we receive experiences, and, the audience likes what they like. How do you connect with them? And really, how do you find the roots through the gatekeeper to the audience, because the gatekeeper is the one who knows how to get shit to the audience. That's what they're for,
Mhm.
basically. So, um, your job is not so much creating the work, it's that, and it's also positioning yourself to know a bunch of gatekeepers, as we just talked about, like before this segment, doing querying for publishing, querying, or, maybe for acting, going to like cattle call auditions is not how you get work.
Mhm.
It's a long shot. You get work by knowing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by work, I mean opportunities. You get opportunities by knowing people. Um, and so how do you put yourself into a position where you can know people that have the ability to um, publish your stuff because they want your stuff, not because they know you personally, but because you found them through knowing what you're doing and then finding people who are a gatekeeper in the same industry as knowing what you're doing. I
Mhm.
think we're talking about stuff people are already doing. I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, not a lot of answers, but certainly some good questions. And I think, maybe a next segment to kind of carry this a little bit further is how to build a meaningful network, right? Or
Oh,
a
that's it. Yeah,
that has that kind of value.
it's a good one.
And not so much that we would, know exactly how to do it, but
Well, I'm just thinking we need a guest.
yeah, we would need, I guess, but we can also think about, experiences where, somebody who we know or met actually played a role in moving us forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Or we played a role in moving them forward.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. Now available on your favorite podcast streaming services. We'd love to hear how we're doing, so please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email at giftedunderachievers@substack.com. Have an awesome day.